All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jason Hanley, and I'm coming to you live from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum in Cleveland, Ohio. It's really fantastic to be with all of you today for an exciting event we have here with none other than Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees, The Temptations. We're really looking forward to this fantastic conversation. I want to thank some of our partners in this event, the Motown Museum in Detroit, Sirius XM, and the Scott Frankfurt studio. That is where the Temptations are right now, and they're going to join us. It's actually the location where they recorded their brand new album, The Temptations 60, because of course the Temptations are celebrating their 60th anniversary. So it's really great to be able to work with all these great partners and look back at this incredible legacy of music. I personally have been a lifelong Temptations fan. I don't know how you can't be once you hear it. It's music that gets into your mind, into your soul, makes you want to move, and makes you, in my case, want to play and sing along too. It's music that's really gone around and changed the world. One of the premier groups of the Motown sound. And we're so excited to have with us today the Temptations, including founding member, the founder of the group, Otis Williams. Otis, are you out there?
I'm
There
out.
he
Yes,
is.
yes, I am. Here I am. How you doing?
Very good, man. So thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Well, man, it's a really exciting time to think about the legacy and history of music that you have recorded over the years with the Temptations. What is it like to be at this point thinking back on 60 years of music? Do you reflect back? Do you think about that history often?
You know what? My opening answer has always been, you could have tipped me over with a feather before I would believe that I'm here 60 years, still enjoying what God let me do for 60 years. I'm loving it, because show business is so fickle. You could be hot one day and the next day, who was that? So and here we are 60 years later. Very blessed. I'm thankful.
Yeah, and you've had the opportunity to sing and work with so many great artists and songwriters over the years too. You really have always surrounded yourself in the group with some of the best of the best.
You know what? I always tell people when I reflect back on my career, Motown was no happenstance. God and his infinite wisdom brought that little two-story family flat together with all those wonderful songwriters, producers, everybody that helped make Motown what it is known for today. That was on purpose. And we came along during the 60s, which is, as I've always said, was the most tumultuous decade within the last 100 years. And we are a product of that. And we have been seeing all kind of unjust do kind of situations. And that's why I said about music. Music is a powerful form, a powerful media, because we have brought people together that oftentimes even congressmen, senators can't even do. But they will come and do it when it's music. I often tell people about Columbia, South Carolina. Now, I'm not denigrating Columbia, South Carolina, because we're getting ready to play it in a few weeks. But we played this place, and when we got there, and I'm speaking of the classic Temps, David, Eddie, Paul, Melvin, and myself. Mm-hmm. And when we got to the venue, there was a rope right down the center of the aisle. Mm-hmm. Blacks on one side, whites on the other side. So with the Temptations, we looked at each other and said, oh, really? You got to be kidding. But we went out there and performed. We came back to that same theater the next year. There was no rope. Blacks and whites sitting side by side, high-fiving and booty banging and enjoying the music. Like I've said, if it wasn't for the sweat that we were sweating, you would have seen 5 guys on stage crying for the power that music, brought them people together.
Yeah, amazing. And if you think about that time period, like you said, where you came up in the 60s, you've got so much going on in society. You've got segregation still, separating people. But sure. It's something that Berry Gordy had in mind. And I think the Temptations were a great example of that sound of young America, right? It didn't matter if you were black or white or who you were. The music was for everybody. And it was to bring people together in that way too, right?
Absolutely. Berry didn't start Motown for just blacks only. That's why it's the sound of young America. So that meant every nationality that's part of America and the rest of the world. So it was built on that premise. It was never just for the blacks only. And, and through the effort and all the wonderful people that were there came up with great music that was appealing to everybody across the world, and I'm glad to be a part of that because that's as it should be. Music is colorless, and we have proven that. We still see it 60 years later. And when we are out there singing, case in point, when we sing My Girl has since become a standard. And when we sang My Girl, we have actually seen people cry, because it would bring back tears of joy. So I'm just glad to be a product of all that have broken down barriers and still, because we still have racial division within our country, but still and yet, we get out there and people be high-fiving and enjoying the music because it's that kind of music.
Well, now we're not going to have enough time today, obviously, to get through the entire career of the Temptations because I've been re-listening to all my records the last week. We'd probably need about 3 days for you and I and the rest of the group to get through it. So we're going to just bounce around a little bit through some key moments in the Temptations history over those 6 years. But I want to start before the Temptations because you were saying people out in the audience cheering and high-fiving, and that was you at one point, right? You loved going to shows and checking out music. Who was some of the artists you were listening to, Otis, before you became a Temptation?
I'm a product of the South. I'm from Texarkana, Texas. And I came to Detroit when my mother brought me there. I must have been about 11, 12 years old. And at that time, that's when rock and roll was really beginning to take shape. And they had a show coming to the Fox Theater. Now, the Fox Theater is the second largest indoor theater in America. Radio City's first. Now, being 14 years old and 15 years old in a place that was like 4,000 to 5,000 people in there. And the acts that I saw was like Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, the Royal Jokers, the Cadillacs, Jimmy Jones, some heavyweight, very popular acts at that time. And when I saw what those groups did on stage, and especially when the Cadillacs came out and they were doing all that flash dancing and, moving and singing. So I looked around and I saw 5,000 people going crazy over what 5 guys were doing on stage. I said, hey, that's what I want to do. Would you believe when I was 21 or 22 years old, we were getting the same reaction at the Fox Theater that I saw about 7 years prior to me being on stage. So from that day on, I was hooked when I saw what those guys and girls were doing at the Fox when I was 14 years old. And here I am still in it 60 years later.
Yeah. And you were really committed in the early days of trying to put a group together and working. Of course, one of the first big groups you were in, The Distance, right? And you guys had a regional sort of Northern Soul Detroit hit with Come On, the song Come On you recorded.
Yeah. Come On, my group at the time was Otis Williams and The Distance. And Come On was released on a little small label, Johnny May Matthews, God rest her soul. And when they released,
we should mention Johnny May Matthews was kind of like the godmother of Detroit soul, right?
Yeah, she could have been a big person, had it worked out that way. But when when Johnny May released "Come On," it was a big hit in Detroit and certain cities around the Detroit areas and Ohio and Chicago. But she didn't have national distribution, so she sold it to a larger company, and it did real fairly well. But anyway, one day we were doing a record hop. And our record hops, like I said on the album, record hops, when a disc jockey is a noted disc jockey, and he said, hey, I want to have the Temptations to come to my record hop, such and such, this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You better go. Because if you didn't go, he would get off your record. So you didn't come to my record hop, I'm going to play it. So we came and we were recording at St. Stephen's Community Center. So we were just doing it, and the audience kept calling us back at least 3 times. So finally we came off, but during the process of us being on stage, in walked Smokey Robinson with the Miracles and Barry Gordy. So when we came off, I'm standing there and I said, wow, that's Smokey and the Miracles. And Mr. Gordy was standing next to me. He said, I really like that record you guys have now. Come see me. I'm starting my own label. He gave me his card. And as fate would have it, we left Johnny May Northern Records because we became disenchanted. And I remembered the card, so I called up to Motown, and Mickey Stevens was the A&R man. And I said, Mr. Gordy asked me to call because if we were to leave where we were with, come see him. And so we did. And Mickey came and had us to come downstairs. And he said, well, let me hear what you guys sound like. So at that time, the Temps consisted of Paul Williams, Eddie Kendricks, Elbert Bryant, Melvin Franklin, and myself. So as we started singing, we had that gospel-rich, thick harmony. Eddie singing high, Melvin low, and all that harmony in between. So Mickey said, boy, Mr. Gordy gonna love y'all. Y'all got some fantastic harmony. And so we signed with Motown. But Mickey told us, he said, but if you want to make Mr. Gordy mad, be late. And I said, no, we don't play late. We don't be late. So we were on time. And from that time all the way up until Barry decided to let Motown fade on out, we were there.
It's funny you mentioned that in those early days with the group when you first formed and signed with Motown, you had that rich gospel sound. And I listened to the first record the first single you put out with Motown, which was "Oh Mother of Mine." That's got almost like a Sam Cooke type vocal harmony, a Soul Stirrers type thing going on, right?
Well, you know what? When we would start rehearsing, now this was after David got in. Al, we had to let go. But David, Eddie, Paul, Melvin, and myself, all of us being Southern guys, we would start rehearsing on gospel. Sang Swan, Silver Tone, Dixie Hummingbirds, Pilgrim Travelers. We'd do that kind of singing. And so that's why our harmony was as such. And we just carried forth once Motown started recording us. And Mr. Gordy said, boy, this guy's harmony. I just love these guys' harmony. So it was really instilled in us because that's what we did from being Southern boys. We listened to gospel music because my grandmother would not let me hear any pop music back then. Boy, listening to that. No, grandmothers, both of mine, great influence. I adhere to a lot of things that they taught me way back then. Now, so we are rather Southern boys.
Of course, then you end up working with a bunch of different people throughout your career at Motown. I think one we got to talk about, you mentioned him already because he was there right when you got signed, which is the great Smokey Robinson, right?
Absolutely.
He worked with you on one of the first big hits you guys had in 1964, "The Way You Do the Things You Do." And that was one of the tracks I think Smokey wrote for you, right?
He did, him and Bobby Rogers. And but it's so funny when Smokey said, I have a song for you guys. Would you come down to the studio? And it must have been about like 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. And like I said, at that time, David Ruffin, Eddie Kendricks, Paul Williams, Melvin, and myself. So we get to Motown that evening. And we went upstairs. Smokey took us upstairs to the rehearsal. And he sat down at the piano. And he passed out the lyrics to us. So I'm looking at the lyrics and say, what? You got a smile so bright. You could have been a candle holding you so tight. What kind of, shut up, Otis, and just go on and sing it. So we went downstairs and we started singing The Way You Do the Things You Do. And when I came out of there after listening at it, I came out of the studio and I said, Smokey, you're a bad man, because anytime you can take something that's nonsensical, if there's such a word, and make it sound like make sense, that's some incredible creative writing. And from that day on, Smokey is a master and, being a great lyricist.
I think for me, that song, listening to all the stuff you recorded, a bunch of songs before that point, they're all great. You've got some really great songs in the catalog, but I think The Way You Do the Things You Do is the first one where you hear, for me, the sort of temps, the sound you have of that gospel harmony, but really getting it into the up-tempo sort of soul R&B. You got the Funk Brothers band behind you and that great song written by Smokey.
Yeah.
I think that's the one where all those elements came together, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. James Jamerson, Robert White, all those great musicians, Benny Benjamin on drums.
Benny Benjamin,
Like, those guys were something else. I remember all the way back in the time before Motown progressed to the point of they would record the track, then we would come in and do it. But initially, all of us would be in the studio, the musicians, the horn players, the singers, and we would make it a little fun. Like, okay, if we're singing our part and one of us hit a bad note or made a mistake in the lyric, so the phone, you rock and roll. See, y'all do whoppers, y'all can't sing. Man, y'all got to come on. So we said, okay. All right, we started singing again. One of the brothers would make a mistake. So we said, oh, we got you now. I don't know. You guys are learned musicians. You're not supposed to make. Shut up, boy. Shut up. Shut up. Let's go on and make the record. So we had a lot of fun working with the Funk Brothers.
And that's funny too. For those of you who've been to and at the Motown Museum now, you can still go back into that original snake pit, the original studio in the back. It's not very big, right? And
Oh,
imagine you guys in there with the band singing. It must have been a real creative, excited time to be back there then, right?
you know what? Whenever I go to Detroit, and I still have family in Detroit, I would
Yeah.
make it a purpose to go up to Motown. And I would go there, and I would stand in the doorway of going down into the snake pit, which is what they call Studio A. I stood there and I said, wow, all of those giant hits came out of that little studio. Whoever would imagine that legacy would be what it is, because to stand there and look, because now when we go in the studio now, it's like being in a spaceship, with all the modules, this and that.
Right, totally, yeah.
Oh, yeah, but not back then. But it turned out so many hits. And that's why I said Motown, God brought it along for a special reason, and then they have a big map showing every state, country, what have you, at some point in time came to Detroit, Michigan to see Motown records. People used to spend vacation coming, not going to California, not going to Hawaii. They would spend their vacation coming to Detroit to see Motown.
Yeah.
That's how popular Motown was.
Absolutely. Well, then you end up with another song, Smokey writes for you, that really becomes a song that you mentioned it already. It's the one that breaks you guys as superstars, which is My Girl.
Yes.
Written by Smokey. And I think is that David Ruffin, I think his first lead vocal on a record too, right?
Well, no, David led It's Growing. Like
okay.
But we were at a club in Detroit, the 20 Grand. Smokey came to see us. And after the show, Smokey came backstage. He said, man, you guys are fantastic. Good grief. I mean, your choreography, you're tight, And then he would say, he looked at David and he said, I have a song for you. Now, us being young, we were like 22, 23 years old, cocky. Oh, man, bring it on. We can sing anything. This so happened, we had to do the Apollo Theater with Smokey and the Miracles. And Smokey would rehearse us in between shows at the Apollo. We flew back to Detroit. We went in the studio and we put the vocals on. And like I've always said, I loved the song initially when I heard it, but when Paul Reiser came and added the strings and the horns to it, I said, oh, wow. The strings and the horns added another kind of daylight. I came up to the control room where Smokey was sitting at the console. I said, Smokey, I don't know how big a record this is going to become, but it's going to be something. They came out, Motown released My Girl in December of 1964. February 65, we were at the Apollo Theater, and we were sent telegrams from Mr. Gordon, the Supremes, the Beatles, Jules Podell, who was the head man at Copacabana, and a few other people. I have them all in my house, permaplaque, because the Beatles, Barry Gordon, the Supremes, sending us a telegram congratulating us.
Wow.
Yeah. And My Girl has since become a standard. Never would have been. One day we were out somewhere and I heard the great Tony Bennett was singing. I said,
yeah.
And when I heard, I said, you have arrived when you have a greatness of Tony Bennett singing My Girl.
Yeah, amazing. A song that I think, singers will be singing, bands will be playing for generations to come.
Yes,
it's just really one of those songs. And, it's the amazing thing that you guys set that standard on that record. That will always be the definitive My Girl for everybody who plays it afterwards. It's amazing.
Sure. It's a love song.
Yeah. Let me also ask you a little bit about, being at Motown. We've talked about like Smokey writing songs and producing. You got Berry Gordy wrote songs for you, but there was also the whole sort of Motown industry there, right? So you've got, of course, you guys are so famous, not just for the singing, but the stage moves. Right. And I know a lot of that came up from you guys in the group, but also you worked with Charlie Atkins too, right?
The late, great Charlie Atkins. But I got to give credit first and foremost to Paul Williams. See, Paul Williams was the one that started us being known for our choreography, because when we started rehearsing, one day we were singing We used to sing Gene McDaniel's 100 Pounds of Clay. So we were singing and we just sang. So Paul said, hold up, hold up. Now, we're not going to be the kind of group just to come out and stand and sing. We got to be exciting. We have movements. We got to sell sex. So I never forget Eddie.
Temptations.
Yeah. Eddie said, oh, Paul, you know I can't. Now, he said, you know, I'm still. Paul said, don't worry about the corn. We call him corn because he loved cornbread. And as time would have it, you know, Paul had the five of us doing all that choreography. And later on, see, I'll tell you about Charlie. When I first saw Charlie's work, it was at the Apollo Theater when he staged Frank and Lyman and the Teenagers and the Cadillacs. And I was amazement when I saw what he did for them. You know, so one day I called one of the Cadillacs stage at stage door. And I said, man, you guys are so fantastic. Who taught you all those steps? He said, he signed an autograph. He said, yeah, young brother, you know, should you make it, look up for a man named Charlie Atkins. And that's what would have it. Washington, D.C. at the Howard Theater. Charlie was there with Gladys Knight and the Pips. I introduced myself to him and I said, I'm one of the Tims, Charlie, and I love your work. He said, hey, Mose. He called me Mose. I said, yeah, man, I love what you are known for. Right today, I never will forget the first two steps that he showed me on the way you do the things you do. Had he staged us. He said, now, if I had you guys, here's what I would have to do. And he had, we almost be over this. And he had us move up, boom, boom, and then back. I never forgot that. That was 1964, 65.
Wow.
And we worked with him all the way up until his demise. But one of the best. I told Charlie one day, I said, I don't mean to sound cryptic. I said, but Pops, when you leave, they don't make them like you. They don't make them like you because he specified choreography for singers. You get a lot of these here choreographers. They'll be, yeah, you be flashing. But when you come up to the mic, you got no wind to sing. Charlie put a step, but when we come back, they got to hear that harmony. Y'all don't know him for your harmony. So I love him for that because he took all of that into consideration.
Yeah, you know, when you say that, and I think back to watching you guys on so many television performances and that, you're right, the choreography fed into the music and the vocals. So if you step back, it's the harmony up to the mic, sing into the mic, right? I mean, it all, the movement and the vocal all went together.
Absolutely. You know, because we're known for our singing first, choreography second.
Yeah.
You know, so Pops was one of a kind, you know, and I love him and miss him, you know, because not only that, but the choreography, he taught us about life. You know, he would sit us down because he vaudeville, you know, he's from that area, you know, so he would pass on a lot of knowledge that I still remember today and try to adhere to today. But the lucky thing about the Temps, or the blessed thing about the Temps, we have worked with some masters. Maurice King, you know, he would teach us about harmonies when they were grooming us to go into the Copacabana and the Smart Room. You know, Harvey Fuqua, known for Harvey and the Moonwalk. Yeah, he would teach us and they would tell us the various things. And like I said, every night when we perform, what makes Motown so uniquely different from all the rest of the companies, they had artist development. And that was, we had to go to school to learn about being in show business.
Right.
Other recording companies, they're not going to do that because first and foremost, that would mean they would have to spend more money. They would have to find guys, girls to teach the artists what to do. Barry didn't care about that. He just wanted his artists to be refined for when they walked out on the stage. We knew what we were doing. And Maurice King said one day, he said, now I'm teaching y'all about what you do on stage, but he said, remember one thing, you're going to be watched more off stage than on stage. So we said, really? Why? He said, because they know what you're supposed to do on stage. What kind of people are you off stage? So it's a lot of little things that they taught us that, you know, I adhere to, and I'll pass it on to the guys in the group today.
Yeah, that's right. You got to keep that knowledge moving forward, right?
Absolutely. Pass it on.
Let me ask you about another great producer you worked with on the later records once Dennis Edwards was in singing vocals, which was Norman Whitfield. You guys had such an incredible stream of, you know, those great psychedelic soul records, they were called. And man, you know, some of the tunes you recorded with Norman were just smash hits, but songs that'll live on forever again, right? You got Cloud 9, Just My Imagination, Ball of Confusion, Psychedelic Shack. What was it like working with Norman on some of those more psychedelic period songs?
Now, I'm going to tell you something about Norman that a lot of people don't know. When we recorded Come On with the Distance, Norman Whitfield was playing tambourine for Popcorn while in the Mohawks. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
yeah,
Another Motown band, actually, eventually,
yes, he
right?
was. And Norman was tall, slim, nice looking, and I'm sitting in the audience, and the girls get to, oh, girl, look at that one on there. He is so fine, he had that kind of thing going for him. To see Norman come from playing tambourine. Now, mind you, he was no learned musician. He would come up with a concept or whatever, and he would get with one of the Motown greats, and they would work it out. Later on came Barrett Strong. But Norman he's just one of those guys that came along at the right time, because he was from New York, and him and his family were driving from somewhere, I think back west, and they stopped in Detroit for a rest because they knew somebody, and for whatever reason they stayed in Detroit. Norman Whitfield used to make his hustle shooting pool. The boy could shoot some pool. They called him White Fox. He was known for shooting pool. He made his hustle on that. So to know him from that point to graduating on up to Psychedelic Soul and Please Return, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, it's just a wonderful testament to see this young man grow to be known as one of the best that Motown had.
Yeah. Those records, was it different making those records than it was the early period? How had Motown changed by the time you got to the late 60s?
Well, like I've always said, the one thing that's constant in life is change. And that's where your strength comes from, when you can adapt to whatever is necessary for you to stay abreast of everything. And Motown did that. Barry, like I said, Barry was just fortunate, wise enough to surround himself with people that thought along those lines of changing and staying current with whatever the musical trend might have been at the time. And I must say, Motown set a trend to a whole lot of music that's being still heard of today. And just so happens he had some of the best songwriters: Hallelujah Holland, Norman Whitfield, Smokey Robinson, Ashford and Simpson, Harvey Fuqua and Johnny, I can't think of his last name. But he had some great, Barry even himself being a great writer, because he had hits on Jackie Wilson. And Barry would tell you all he wanted to do is have hit records, make money and sing, and make money and sing to the girls, have songs that would appeal to the girls. So he was an everyday guy, and just so happened God in his infinite wisdom let Barry form this hit company, and look at it today. When I hear of them building a 50 or either $60 million annex to Motown, hey, tell you how strong Motown was for us. The Temps, we would be on a 2, 3, 4 month tour, back to back to back. But when the tour went in, tired, we were young, dead tired. Where we would want to go first? We would go up to Motown first before even going home, because Motown was such a place to be at that we would go up there just, okay, what's happening? What?
Yeah, check back in, right?
Check back in, see who's doing what and what's been happening. Then we'd get back in our cars and station wagon and go home. That's the strength that Motown had on us.
The artist that probably is nearest and dearest to me is Otis Williams. We've been together off and on, yes indeed, for 53 years, and we're still going strong. We ain't too proud. The one thing that I left out of my speech to Mr. Gordy that July afternoon was Broadway. Who knew that 60 years later, Motown would have 2 smashes on Broadway, Motown the Musical and Ain't Too Proud? Berry Gordy is Motown. Motown is the world. Trust me, in a racist country, when we accomplished what we accomplished, men, women, black, white, green, blue, we were Motown, and we fought the whole world. And we won.
All right, and joining us now, of course, is longtime Temptations manager, Shelley Berger, who's been working with them since the end of 1966 and still works with the Temptations today. Shelley, thank you so much for coming in and joining us.
Oh, it is my great pleasure and honor to be involved in this interview for something as important as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Motown Museum. So it's great. And to be with my pal, it's even better.
Yeah, you guys got to be pals at this point. I mean, to stay together, working as a manager and artist that long in the music industry, you guys must have a real chemistry of working together, right?
Well, teeth and tongue fall out, but not him and I.
Don't talk about teeth falling
Oh,
out.
that's right.
That's a very, very sore subject.
So, Shelley, I think one of the interesting things about the story of how you get connected with the Temptations is that Berry Gordy actually brought you into Motown with the idea of managing some of these groups and sort of capitalizing on the success they were having and bringing them to even bigger and bigger audiences. Is that right?
No, it's wrong.
Who?
I was hired to open the California office of Motown.
Oh, okay.
I had never met Berry Gordy before I was hired to work for Motown. And my first trip to Motown, excuse me, I met Berry Gordy, and we had our first meeting, and he said, "What is your background?
Yeah.
Why did they hire you?" And I told him what my background was, and I told him that I had managed a number of groups. And he said, "Do you think you could get our artists on television?"
Oh, right.
And I said, "Mr. Gordy, not only can we get our artists on television, one day we'll produce our own television specials, and one day we're going to produce our own movies, and one day they're going to do a documentary about Motown."
Huh.
This was July 6th or 7th, 1966. At which point he excused himself from the meeting, called the man who hired me and said, "Fire him." And the man said, "Okay, I'll fire him, but what is the reason?"
Yeah.
He said, "Either he's high on drugs or he's the biggest liar I ever met in my life."
Whoa.
And Ralph Seltzer, who was the man who hired me, said, "Okay, I could fire him now, but he set up this TV show for all the artists on Motown for the first time to be on a show which was just about Motown." It was a show called Where the Action Is. And BG said, "Okay, well, we won't fire him yet. We'll wait until after the show and then
see how it goes."
And then he made a request of me that I put an artist by the name of Chris Clark on the show, and who had never really done anything, and the show didn't want her on. And I said, "But she's white." And they said, "Oh, okay, fine. If she's white, we'll put her on the show." So when they were blocking her, I just noticed the body language of Mr. Gordy, and he was just pacing back and forth. And I just said, "Do you have a problem? Is there anything wrong?" He said, "Well, I don't know. How are they going to shoot her?" And I said, "Well, why don't I get the producer to come over and you can tell him what you want?" And again, he's looking at me like, "Who is this guy?" And not only did the producer come over, who was a friend of mine, and he said, "Miss Gordy, why don't you go into the booth with the director, and you can tell the director exactly how you want Chris shot." And I like to say it took from 7:00 in the morning till 3:00 in the afternoon to shoot the entire Motown show. And it took from 3:00 to 7:00 that night to shoot Chris Clark. This was Berry Gordy's first directing
First
show.
foray. Well,
So he kept me on,
you know, he didn't fire me, and then he called me to a meeting in Las Vegas about a month later, and again he asked me some questions. I gave him some answers, and it wasn't what he was used to hearing. You see, you have to understand that in 1966 we were having many hit records, but Motown was not what Motown became,
right?
As far as the entity and the force that it did become in the industry and in America. So, you know, I was very, very fortunate to be a part of that. So by time we left Vegas, he said, look, I manage the Supremes and my sister manages the Temptations. Now you manage the Supremes and you manage the Temptations.
Wow.
And, you know, let me see what you can do.
Well, let's talk about something you did do, which is the incredible combination of the Supremes and the Temptations on a couple albums and television shows. And I mean, that was taking two of the sort of biggest groups in the world at that point and putting them together.
Well, it's very, very interesting. The Temptations, when I started managing them, were the number one R&B group at Motown. If you went to a Temptations show, the audience was much more slanted black to white than if you went to a Supreme show, which it was the opposite. And to me, to try and move the Temptations into the general market, I went to Otis and the guys and said, look, I am going to put you on a show to co-star with the Supremes in a theater that they're playing later on, which didn't sit very, very well with Eddie Kendricks, you know. Well, who are they and what, you know? And I said, you got to trust me on this. Yeah. And I have to say that from the very beginning, Otis and Melvin, they were the ones that I would talk to for the most part. And whether they liked it or they were worried about it, they gave me the latitude to do what I was trying to accomplish. So we played a theater in Connecticut called the Oakdale Theater, which I must say the Temptations play to this day.
Wow.
Still play the Oakdale Music Theater.
Yeah.
And anyway, so the Temps had the first half of the show, and they went out there and they killed. I mean, they killed. I mean, standing ovation at the end. And it was a theater in the round, and they came running up the aisles afterwards. And, you know, and Eddie Kendricks says to me, let them follow that, you know, and they go into the dressing room. And, you know, intermission, now it's time for the Supremes. And here are the Temps coming out in their robes, their Temptations robes, and they each had a different color terry cloth robe with their name on it. And they're standing in the back, and the Supremes overture starts, you know, down, 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 da down, and they come running down the aisles, and the audience stands, gives them a standing ovation. And I look at Eddie and I said, it took you an hour to get a standing ovation. They haven't opened their mouth yet, and they've got a standing ovation. That's why we're here.
Right.
And the next year, the Temptations starred at the Oakdale Music Theater, and I believe we put Gladys Knight on to open for us, and I refer to it as piggybacking.
Yeah.
Whenever we could take an up and coming act, because we didn't need, the Temptations didn't need an act to sell tickets.
Right.
We just needed a great show. So if we had an artist that I felt was an up and coming artist at the company, we would use them to be the co-star and open the show for the Temps.
Otis, do you have any memories of performing with the Supremes in those television specials at all?
Oh, absolutely. One of the first big ones for us was TCB.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Which
we had,
was when Dennis Edwards first joined the group,
and,
too, right?
yeah, that's true. Dennis had just joined the group, and we were here in LA, NBC, and the late great vocal coach Maurice King was teaching us intricate harmonies because we were doing do 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 do. Do you remember that? What's the name of that?
Fiddler on the Roof.
Fiddle on the Roof.
Sunrise, Sunset.
Yes, those songs we had never, sung before, and but it was a great experience. I still see some of that on TV from time to time with a big stage and it's acrylic where you could see through it, and
Yeah, right.
yeah, so a wonderful experience, and then I think the next year or so, then we did GIT, Getting It Together. So we were the only two black acts of our ilk to have that kind of presentation on television. Now, mind you, that was during the 60s. So been a wonderful ride.
You understand that television at that time was not an entertainment industry, it was an advertising industry.
Right.
All shows got on because they had a sponsor. You couldn't get a show on television, like NBC would not put a show on. It became somebody's show, the Kraft show or whatever.
Mhm.
And the advertising business is probably one of the most racist businesses in America. And to break through, you needed someone with the talent that the Temptations had, that the Supremes had, and the popularity and the power behind them that Motown was, for someone to say, okay, I'm going to take a chance. Because in those years, I mean, if a black Harry Belafonte kissed Julie Andrews on the cheek, and people in the South went
Crazy.
berserk.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was just a couple of years before.
Mhm.
So what, I say the words about the TV specials, but you cannot put it into words what a monumental accomplishment it was. And it's just three things: Temptations, Supremes, and Berry Gordy.
Yeah.
That triumvirate who put together everything else, made life very, very easy for someone like me.
I wanted to ask you guys about another thing from that time period, of course, which was getting the Temptations to play at the famous Copacabana, the Copa Club, and the great live album, Live at the Copa, that the Temptations put out at that time. Talk a little bit about that, because I know the Supremes played there. I think Marvin Gaye played there at one point, too. That seemed to be a location that a lot of the Motown artists started showing
Well,
up
you
at.
see, the Copacabana was the best club in America. If you were a hit at the Copa, you could get 52 weeks of bookings throughout the United States in supper clubs. That was the club.
Mm.
And so we made a deal. And of course, the deals that you made at the Copa were horrible. But you were playing the Copa, and
Right.
interesting that we should be talking to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is in Cleveland,
Yep.
because the break-in date for the Copa was at the Versailles Club in Cleveland, Lenny Luxembourg's Versailles, and we had done this whole new show for the Temptations geared to the Copa.
Yeah.
And it was more general market, more pop songs, standards as well as their hits. And
Including some of the standards that were recorded on In a Mellow Mood, too, right?
Mellow Mood was an album that I asked Mr. Gordy if we could do that to create a larger audience. And it was an album that Paul had come to me and said, look, I'm very frightened of this album because I think we're going to lose our fans. if we put out an album like this. And I said, Paul, when the Temptations sing a song, it's a Temptation song. I don't care what the song is. I said, you're not going to lose anybody. You're going to get people. You're going to gain a larger audience, which is, what happened. So here we are at the Versailles, and BG and Diana fly in to see the show at the Versailles, and we used to do 2 shows a night, and you did, you only had like 45 minutes to an hour in between shows.
Right.
And I'm sitting with BG and Diana, and he's watching. And Barry Gordy, when he watched the show, was spending the entire time writing notes. And halfway through the show, he looked at me, and I won't use the colorful language that he addressed me with. You're trying to kill the Temptations. Is that what you're trying to do? You're trying to kill the Temptations with this kind of show. And I said, they're playing the Copa, BG. It's not, He said, I don't care. You're ruining the Temptations. This will have to stop. Show is over. Back into the dressing room. Gets the 5 guys together. Gets Maurice. Gets
Harvey.
Who is it? No, our
Cornelius
Grant. And he says, okay, here's how we're changing the show. We're opening with blah, blah, blah. And of course, the Temptations, being the professionals that they are and were, said, okay, BG. And they just changed a 1-hour show in 40 minutes and went out and did the new show. And I said to Barry Gordy, I want you to know something. I've been going to the Copacabana since I'm 3 years old. I know the Copa audience. And I am telling you, I cannot wait until we open at the Copa next Thursday. And we open at the Copa, and I'm sitting there with BG, and I'm just waiting. And the Temps, ladies and gentlemen, Jules Bordell, Copacabana presents the Temptations. And the guys coming out to get ready, I think was our opening song.
Yeah.
And the audience just gets up and starts screaming. And I looked at Barry Gordy and said, let me tell you something. I will never disagree with you again in life. And you say, I'm going along with it, whether I believe it or not. And, they just went on from there. I mean, there were lines around the block. And they were just established as now in the pantheon of supper club headliners, Sinatra, Sammy Davis, Nat Cole, and the Temptations. That's what the Copa could do for you, and that's what the Copa did on that level for the Temps, which made them more palatable to the TV industry as well.
Yeah, totally. And like you said, a great live album out of that.
And we were scared shitless.
Didn't know what was going to happen from that.
Oh,
You
the Copa.
could get scared at the Copa.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, the Copa, they didn't have a stage. It was, there was no platform or anything. There was
Right, because it was more of like a dinner club. It would have been the floor.
Yeah.
Like in between shows, they would do dancing for the audience.
Right.
Well, the Temptations were doing the kind of business that there were a number of the shows that we couldn't do choreography because they would keep adding tables and
sell out more and more.
Bandstand.
Yeah.
We just had to sing basically this kind of style. I mean, they couldn't even make moves. It was an incredible success as it was each time they played the Copa.
One of the things that I remember about the Copa, well, many things really, but I always think back, Paul Williams, we were doing For Once in My Life. And Adam Clayton Powell came to see us. And when Paul was singing, he would put so much emotion into whatever he was singing. Adam Clayton Powell stood up. Everybody else was seated. Adam Clayton Powell stood up, and tears was running down his eyes.
Wow.
Behind what Paul Williams was singing. and everybody at the Copacabana stood up because Paul was that kind of a singer. That I never forget moments like that being at the Copa.
Wow, that's amazing.
I don't think anybody has done a rendition of For Once in My Life, including Stevie.
No.
That was like Paul Williams. I mean, in the show, Ain't Too Proud, James Harkness, who plays Paul in the show,
Right.
and when he does that number, is a standing ovation in the middle of the show.
Yep.
I mean, and this is not a concert. This is a play. People are watching a play.
Right, a Broadway show.
That's how Paul affected people when he did that song.
Yeah. Let me jump forward in time a little bit because I want to talk about going forward to 1982 when you put the reunion tour and the reunion album together. And I will say, I think that's a great album with Rick James producing some stuff, including Standing on the Top, which I think is just a great track. And then Lock It in the Pocket, which is the other one Dennis sings lead on, which is just a great track. Tell me about that reunion period of getting the group kind of all back together to do that tour and that album.
Well, I'll be frank with you. I met it with mixed emotions.
Yeah.
Bittersweet memories. And I'm not going to sit here and denigrate none of the guys. It wasn't all it could have been.
Yeah.
We started letting things matter that shouldn't matter. It was short-lived. And because for the longest time, I didn't want to do it. David and Eddie said, "Oh man, come on, play a bit Bob Bam." And Melvin said, "Oh, one more time." I said, "Okay, Melvin. All right, because of you." And naturally, Shelley was in on the scene, but it was bittersweet. And so
I went to Otis and Melvin. We had just played Washington. We were going to Radio City, and I had a big falling out with David and Eddie. And I said to Otis and to Melvin, "Look, guys, this is a smash, but I have to tell you, when we finish, I cannot continue on with David, especially with David, because it just doesn't work for me."
Yeah.
And Otis said, "You ain't leaving. They're leaving.
Yeah.
You are not leaving." And he has always given me, since 1966, he has always given me that leeway and that trust that he will go with me, because I'm telling you, the reunion tour was a smash.
Yeah.
I mean, it was brilliant, but the same crap for the reason that David wasn't in the group
In the first place. Yeah, right.
It started to have I like to say it was the first standing ovation, and David was off to the races again.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's one of those moments where for the fans, it kind of meant one thing, but for you guys, it had a lot of the old stuff that kind of came back as you were doing it, right?
They had us billed as the return of the seven. Each one of our names, David Ruffin, Otis Williams, Paul wasn't there, Eddie Kendricks, Dennis Edwards, Glenn Leonard, Richard Street. Whenever one of them missed the show, they took the name off the billboard. So I told Eddie, I said, "Man, after this is over with, y'all got it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to Motown." And Eddie wanted to come with us, but it just didn't work out. It didn't work out. Well, I don't want to sit up and say, "Oh yeah, it was great," but it could have been great. But
it was great for the audience. It was great. It was brilliant.
It wasn't great to us.
But you have to as a human being, you have to live. You can't just say, "Hey, we're going to keep doing this," and I'm miserable, and keep going on. I mean, we didn't need that. It was a great shot in the arm, but it came and it went. And as you said, the album was wonderful. Standing on the Top was great, but it was what it was. The Temptations just carried on. Whatever the hits or misses were, the Temptations carried on.
And my friend in Philadelphia, Kenny Gamble on Gamble and Huff,
Yeah,
he heard about it. He really wanted to do it because he's always wanted to do a song on the Temps.
Huh.
But I guess when we met with him, I don't know whatever happened, but it didn't manifest.
Huh.
But, could have been a great thing. Could have been a great thing.
That's an interesting, like, what if, right? What if you guys had done something with Philly International? It could have been an interesting record.
I think I'm safe in saying we self-destruct.
Yeah.
We didn't self-destruct. We hurt ourselves. We never destructed.
Well,
Because of Otis and Melvin at that time, the Temps did not destruct.
Well, there's something to be said then, Otis, about you holding the group together. You know, we're looking back on 60 years of Temptations music, right? And you've got ups and downs and different things throughout that time period. But for you guys, it seems like even when you hit rough patches like that, it always kind of came back to the music and to continuing that Temptations legacy. Was that something you guys thought about and tried to keep going?
I'm going to tell you something, that it's not only the music. I had a meeting with the guys yesterday because we have a new member. You meet him. His name is Tony Grant. I will never forget, one day I came home, and I'm always getting, Otis, would you please return my call if somebody would like to speak to you? So this one particular fan mail I got, I did just that. And the daughter said, "Oh, Mr. Williams, I'm so happy that you called. Let me get my mother." Her mother came on the phone and she said, before she even said, "Hi, Otis, I asked God, don't take me until I talk to Otis Williams." She said that 2 times. Startled me. And I sat there. When she ran down the importance of our music and how the Temptations affected her, now, like I always said, I sat on the edge of my bed and I was crying because I have never got that kind of adulation from somebody. And after she finished, she said, "Now, God, you can take me." I said, "Do you mean to tell me this is what the Temptations, our music, has affected people?" That's grandiose. It don't get any bigger than that.
Yeah. All right, so here we are back with the rest of the Temptations now joining us for the final part of the conversation. So great to have all the guys here today. We've got Ron Tyson, Terry Weeks, Willie Green, and Anthony Grant. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
You know, I know for all of you guys, it's got to be something, whether you have been in the group for a while or you've joined over the last number of years, becoming a Temptations got to be something that just blows your mind as a musician. Thinking about stepping into that group and joining Otis and singing this incredible catalog. But what I love about the Temptations is you guys are always making new music and always moving forward too. So maybe let's start with Ron, because Ron, you kind of joined the group right before the Motown 25 performance, which was a pretty big deal to come into the Temptations right at that time. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to join at that moment.
Well, I had the opportunity to help produce an album on the Temptations. They came to Philly and I was in Philly, and we got to know each other that way. And so a DJ named Jimmy Bishop called us and said, "Hey, the Temps are looking for a first tenor. So you guys tell Ron to call Otis." I called, left a message for Otis that I knew a guy who, he might be interested in, who was a singer, and so waited for him to call me back. When he called back, it took him a couple of days to find me, but they found me. So when he called back, he said, "Yeah, man, I need to talk to you about that guy that you mentioned as a tenor singer, So I laughed for a minute, and I said, "Well, it's me." So he laughed, and we giggled for a minute, and he said, "Well, okay, well, you know what? Let me get back to you, So I knew he had to go run a credit check on me,
Right.
He called back in a couple of days. He said, "Well, can you come on down and meet me in Florida, and we'll go take it from there. We'll wanted to see what I could do." They heard me sing, wanted to see could I dance. So I flew down to Florida. It snowed 17 inches of snow in Philly that next day, so I couldn't get out for 3 days. So when I got down there, they saw me and they told me, okay, man, it looks pretty good. Go home, pack your bags, and we'll see you on the road. So then got on the road. He said, well, look, man, we're gonna we're gonna teach the choreography to you, and then take you to Portland and Seattle, Washington, and break you in, and give you the opportunity to get worked up, on the routines and stuff. Then he called me one day while I'm in rehearsal. He said, well, Ty, it look like we're not gonna be able to take you to Seattle and Portland. So I'm like, okay, well, what's up? I'm thinking you're going to send me home, right? So he said, because we got a TV show that came up called Motown 25. That's a TV show. Okay. So I got to get myself energized for this TV show. He just laid on my head. So the choreographer, Lon Fontaine, he was like, oh man, you'll be fine. I'm gonna get you in shape and all this and that. So when we got to the theater to do the taping, we standing backstage, and so Martha Reeves was standing next to me. So she said, Ron, everybody's gonna be watching you tonight. I said, watching me for what? She said, well, you the new kid on the block, so they want to see what you got. I'm like, oh, I need you to tell me that. And we get ready to go on stage. So some steps we had to walk up, and Smokey's introducing us, ladies and gentlemen, the Four Tops and the Temptations. So we walking up these steps, and I'm saying to myself, Lord, feet, please don't fail me now. So we got up on the stage, and we got out there and we started dancing. And all I could think about was, don't let me get up to this microphone. Don't nothing come out.
Yeah.
But that was my introduction to it, and I'm here for almost 40 years later. So
Yeah.
it's a cool thing for me. It's a memorable time for me.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about a record from that time period too. That's a favorite of mine, and it's Truly for You, and the single Treat Her Like a Lady, which I think is just a great classic, Temptation song. Tell me a little bit about that. I think, Otis, did you write that one too, or co-write it? Right?
Yeah.
Truly for You was written by Otis, myself, and Vic Karstoffen.
Yeah.
And Treat Her Like a Lady was written by me and Ollie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those were good times, exciting times. I knew I had to sing my best, because everybody's watching it. That was in the beginning stages when I got in the group. So it was Truly for You is a wonderful song that we loved. We were hoping for it to do a lot better than it did, but you have to go with the flow of how the DJs and the people are buying records is going. So
That's one of my favorite songs by us.
mine too. Wow.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys were working with some of the members of Earth, Wind, and Fire at that time too, right?
Yeah, Al McKay and
Ralph Johnson.
Ralph Johnson, right?
Yeah, Otis, I agree with you. I think that record's just fantastic. I think that's one of those albums that, like you said, it probably could have been bigger at the time, but I think today people will dig back and find these records that came out and just they still connect with people. And I think that's one of them, actually. I think it's a great Temptations album.
I know that this jockey he has since passed on, but he would close his show with Truly for You.
Is that right?
Yes, he died
Wow.
a while, but he said he loved it, and it turned out to be a great song.
Wow. All right, let's think too about Terry, you came in, I think was it 1999 that you joined?
Actually, it was 96.
96.
96.
So tell us a little bit about your experience. What was it like coming into the Temptations?
Oh man, it was unbelievable. Unbelievable how we met to begin with. We met in Hollywood on a street corner, in the corner of Cherokee and Hollywood, outside the shoe store. We come to find out that's what we had in common, a love for shoes.
He's to my man here.
Yes.
And Jerry.
And we stood out, myself and two of my friends were out sightseeing that day. And we stood outside. We said, we're going to wait till Otis comes outside and ask him if he has a moment and just say hello to him. So he comes outside. She turns to me, my friend Cecilia. She says, sing. And so I just do what we do. Started singing. Man, we exchanged numbers that day. I had never met anyone of his stature. Had to be brushed off. That was the Hollywood introduction for me. And he ended up calling a couple days later, and we've been stuck together ever since.
Let me tell you about it. See, he just skimmed over it. When I came out of the store, she said, Mr. Williams, you have a minute? I said, yes, I do. She did this. Cole, brother, sing, go for it. And he started saying, now look, when you sing a Donny Hathaway song, you better know what you're doing or leave it alone. This brother started singing a Donny Hathaway song, so I turned to my right ear and I said, okay. And I got his number, and we've been together. He was with a group called For Lovers Only. Didn't happen. Then I told Tyson, I said, I can't let him go. He might be a little short on the stature, but he sings like a 6-footer. And boy, got some pipes on him.
Oh yeah.
Terry, were you surprised when you got that phone call? Did you think you were going to get a call saying, "Hey, do you want to join the Temps?" Or was that a surprise to you?
This is back in the day when we still had answering machines, and all three of us just stood there and we looked at the answering machine and we were like, "Well, what do we do?" And we were sitting there. I said, "Well, we gotta call him back." I said that would be the proper thing to do. And from there, just started talking and in general, and come to find out that his wife was from Birmingham. I was from that area. We started talking about that, and lo and behold, a few months later, we hook up again, and we're still together.
There you go. Well, I got to mention the album, and I think, Terry, if I'm correct, the first album you appeared on is another one of my favorites, and an album that was a massive success for you guys, which was Phoenix Rising. What an incredible record.
Yeah.
Comes out in 98, and my song off of that is Stay.
Absolutely.
Right? The track opens with a sample of My Girl, so it lets you know the Temps are here, but then it takes it in a whole nother new direction.
Well, you got to give credit to a wonderful Nada Michael Walden, because we flew up to the Bay Area to do, what was the name of the song? If I Give You My
Heart.
So Nada called me. He said, Otis, I want you to listen to something. So he pulled me aside to another room, and he started playing Stay. Now, like I said, we went up to do another song. And at the time, the group consisted of Terry, Harry, Theo Peoples, Tyson, and myself. I came out of that room. I said, forget If I Give You My Heart. We recording this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was the way Narda proposed it to us. He was like, hey, guys, hey, can you think of anybody that has ever sampled themselves?
Yeah.
Wow. And we were like, we haven't.
No.
So we could be the first, and we were.
Well, it's crazy for me as a fan. When I heard that, I thought, "There's the Phoenix Rising, man. There's look at My Girl, and there's the new version of the band coming right out of it, right?"
I think it's Kadar Massenberg, who at that time was the president of Motown.
Yeah.
Because he loved Otis and he loved the Temptations.
Yeah. Right.
And at that point in time, anybody who took over that chair was always trying to make a name for themselves. They were going to be the new Berry Gordy.
Right.
And Kadar said no. He rang me and he said, "You tell Otis, I'm going to get them a smash album."
He did.
And he did.
And the reason we named it Phoenix Rising, that's what the Temps has always been about. We've always hit the tape flight again, like the Phoenix bird. So that's why I call it Phoenix Rising, because that's been our history.
Yeah. A great record, really. I still listen to that record today. I think it's just it really has an incredible sound to it and feels very modern. It mixed a lot of elements in, but it still feels Temptations. You still hear that great vocal harmony that you guys were able to achieve on that record.
Thank you.
Let me talk about another record, taking it forward a little bit. And I think, again, Willie Green, this might be one of the first records you were on, is All the Time.
Yes, it is.
Right? Tell me a little bit, Willie, about you coming into the Temptations and then recording on that record with them.
Well, as I grew up, I always wanted to be a Temptation or have a group as good as the Temptations. But when I finally got in the group, or was being auditioned for the group, basically, they auditioned me more on my choreography and being able to dance right. So Terry, And Terry Weeks and Michael Henderson were my teachers, and they taught me so well that I learned a 90-minute show with the vocals and the choreography in 4 rehearsals.
Wow.
And they threw me in the water. They threw me on stage, like I'm handcuffed in the water doing shoulder strokes. So, but I prayed for God to let me not forget anything. And
Right.
that was the best show I have ever done.
It's been downhill.
Now, all the mistakes I should have made on the first show hit me on about the 4th.
Right.
But no, it's just been awesome, man. You know, being with my heroes. You know, when I grew up, that's who I wanted to be, and now, you know, through the grace of God, you know, I am one of the members, and I really appreciate that. But with all the time, it was like my coronation as a Temptation. Because when we finished, Otis came to me and said, "Well, you're now officially a Temptation." And I want to thank Otis for keeping the group long enough for me to get in it.
Oh, I must say, on behalf of Willie, you know, Melvin Franklin set the tenor about bass singers. And
I mean, we have to say, Melvin's one of the greatest bass singers of all time, right?
I must say, not knocking the others that have been since Melvin and before me. Willie he's very technical, you know, as far as the making man, you got to sing it, hold out the chord. I love that, you know, because that was Melvin. Melvin was the same way, you know. Come on, we got to do that. And so Willie is of that ilk, and he can dance, and he's silly as hell.
I think a great song off that record. I think it's on that record. It's "Waiting on You," which is a great track off of there too.
Oh yeah. Wow, you were on it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. I told you, I'm not kidding. I got the records at home.
They're singing the hell out of it too.
Yeah. Well, let's bring it up to the present, to the right now, and talk about the Temptations. You know, the 60th year of Temptations music, a new record coming out. And I had a chance, thank you guys for sending it over to me. I got a chance to listen to it. And I want to say, awesome work, man. It's really an incredible record. You know, so many of the songs on there, When We Were Kings, you know, looking back on that history of the Temptations, going back and thinking of each of the singers in each of the periods. It's going to be Yes or No, which I love that Smokey Robinson is on the track singing with you guys. How cool is that, right? I'll be honest, I think one of my favorite songs on the record is Time for the People. And I think that's a song that really...
Tyson and TC, our conductor.
Yeah. Incredible song, and I think really speaks to the times, which is something the Temptations have always done. I felt like hearing that Time for the People brought me back to thinking of Ball of Confusion. What that probably meant at that time, right?
Yeah.
And then Breaking My Back was great. And I thought, man, there's like the new Just My Imagination, right? I think that's going to be, you know, the good, smooth song. That and the it's going to be Yes or No. That'll be the one I think the audiences are going to respond to out there.
Thank you.
All right.
That's old.
Now, you guys got a chance recording right in the studio where you're at right now, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about working there with Scott.
Well, when it was time for us to get ready for the 60th album, Derek, our road manager and friend, we were talking about different studios, and the management that I'm with now, Boulevard Management, a young lady said, well, she looked it up, and Scott's studio came up. Now, it's so ironic, I live up the street. I could walk here if my right knee wasn't so, I could walk to and from. Magnificent setup. Him and his wife have done a great job of setting up this studio. And I just told him earlier, I said, whatever I do vocal-wise, recording, I'm coming here. Not only because it's down the street from me, but he just took me into the control room. Oh, he's got the Jim Johnson in there. Jim Johnson, man, that's all right. And so I love what he's done, and him and his wife have treated us extra special. So great environment. you know, I mean, it's a home, and you know, most cases when we go in the studio, very esoteric, you know, it's a studio, everything. Here you get like, if one of us get tired, they have a room where we can go and sit down and just chill out until whomever's next to come up to do something. So we love coming here.
Yeah. And you guys worked, you mentioned Nadia Michael Walden earlier, got to work with him again on this record, right?
Yeah. When we were Kings, I think, in all honesty, when I wake up, that's the first thing I do. And it was like an epiphany. That came immediately, like, Otis, you should do a song about the Classic Five.
Yeah.
I wanted Smokey to do it at first, but Smokey was sick.
Mm.
So I laid down, I said, who would be? I said, Nada. So I called Nada, and I told him the concept, gave him some lyrical points, and talking about the four-headed microphone, which we're known for. And so we bounced back and forth, and we're getting great reaction off of that, you know, that song, because of the lyrical content, and I guess it make people think about the original Chimps. Because I must say, not trying to sound egotistical, we are the only group that have ever came out on stage with a four-headed microphone. And
We had that here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I saw it. Yeah, I saw it.
It was on display here. Amazing.
Hey, but check this out. One day I was at Motown, and what's the name, Robin
Robin Terry.
She said, "Oh, so has that four-headed microphone?" I said, "Well, I gave it to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame about 1990." Do you think you can call them and say we want it back? I said, "Oh, I can't do that. I can't do this." Yeah, no, I said, "No, I wouldn't do that." So what we're gonna do? We're gonna come up with a new four-headed mic and bring that back to what's happening now.
There you go. Well, I got to ask too, Tony Grant. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, man.
No, you
Go on, say what?
quit to it.
Well, Tony.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask Tony what it's like, you know, joining just recently. What's it like to be in the group for you, and how did you kind of get connected with it?
Well, my dreams have gone from dreams to legacy. I'm so grateful to be a part of this group. You couldn't have told me 5 years ago that I would be a part of this group. I would have laughed you out of the room. But the fact that I am a part of the group now, I'm grateful to God for this opportunity. Mr. Otis all of these guys have been such a blessing to me since I've been a part of it. But I've gotten to sit down with Mr. Otis and Ron and really, really talk about the history. And they poured into me about some things that I wasn't allowed to listen to when I was growing up. I grew up in a church family, so I didn't really listen to the Temptations or R&B music and things of that nature. So I'm like a kid in a candy store right now.
Right.
I have the opportunity of grabbing hold of something brand new that's a part of my life, and I'm just more excited than I've ever been about anything in my life.
He said to me a few days ago, not to cut you off, and I said, wow, that's heavy. He said, Otis, I'm at the top. I said, top. He said, don't get any bigger or better than being in the Temptations. Now, he used to sing with another group called As Yet, which I love.
Yeah.
You know, but he said, don't get any better than being in the Temps. And he told me, and somebody else said, how did Tony get in to get in the Temps? You know, how did he get in the Temps? Yes, I love y'all, but we got Tony now.
Oh, yeah.
What do you guys think about, you know, working together? I think one of the things about vocal groups, great vocal groups, is it's the harmony. You have to be able to work together and sing together, or it doesn't work, right? If the harmony's not there,
that's right.
You don't have a group like the Temptations. Right. What do you guys think about working with each other in that harmony? Is it something that with each member you're kind of finding a way and figuring it out? And how do you think about that when you have someone, you know, like Tony come into the group?
Well, our harmonies kind of have the gospel flavor, you know, and pretty much people that listen to us, they hear that 4 or 5 man harmony, and with the bass singing, the tenor singing, you know, and then Otis's voice coming in when he's doing leading parts and stuff, and it just has that harmony, that gospel ring. At least that's how I look at it. Maybe I don't know if everybody looks at it that same way.
Right.
I come from a gospel background.
Yeah, you're right.
I know that's how I feel about it. Yeah, I felt like that before I got in the group.
Yeah.
And the group that I had, we kind of built ourselves that way, you know. So,
and if I may add, that goes along with that is having the same spirit. I think everybody in the group has the same spirit, and collectively we blend together very well as one. So with having that same spirit and then that chemistry on top of it, it's just magic.
You got a smile so right. You know you could have been a girl. I wanted you so tight. You know you could have been a girl. Girl, the way you struck me on my feet. You know you could have been a boo. The way it smells so sweet. You know you could have been some perfume. Love, you could have been anything that you wanted to, and I can tell the way you do the things you do. Let's get this party started, y'all. Come on. As pretty as you are, you know it could have been a flower. Good looks was a minute. You know that you could be an hour. Girl, the way you stole my heart. You know you could have been a two. Baby, you're so smart. You know you could have been a school. Oh, you could have been anything that you wanted to, and I can tell the way you do the things you do.
But I can tell you what Otis from the very beginning has brought to the group. You don't have to be in the Temptations to feel a part of it. The actors who are in Ain't Too Proud, the Broadway show, feel a part of the Temptations. They're no longer actors. They feel a part of the Temptations. It all of a sudden you become imbued with that feeling of the legend of the Temptations. It's more than a singing group. It's more than a performing group. It's a thing. What can I tell you? And it doesn't matter whether it's the Broadway company or the national company. People immediately get it. It's no longer an acting job. It's no longer a singing job.
Yeah.
A lot of groups, and you go in and you become a singer. When you become a member of the Temptations, you're a member. You're a part of an icon.
History.
You know, and I mean, it's the #1 group in the history of rhythm and blues.
Yep.
I mean, that's not something I made up. That's something that Billboard and you know, that's what they said.
I was talking with the guys yesterday, and I got a little bit emotional from it because for 60 years, like I told them, the Temps, in all honesty, people thought we would have been through when we lost David Ruffin. But here we sit before you today, different guys with the same story, making great music, performing for people, and galvanizing as a unit. And I love these guys, you know, Terry and Tyson, a little more than others because they've been with me. Now I like to get that from Willie and Tony, which I think is there. You know, this group, like I told them, this is a very, very special unit to have been through it. In my home, I got to add him and 2 others. It's about 30 different guys that have been in this group. And I've had to deal with all those talented guys. But, you know, for whatever reason, we had to do what we had to do. But the 5 of us sit before you today. There's a reason for this group to still be together. There's a reason. And it ain't just about music.
Amazing. Thank you, gentlemen. It's so great. Oh, go ahead, man. What were you going to say?
I was just gonna say, well, you know, everybody, old gentleman told me years ago, he said, everybody that's part of your past don't necessarily make it to your future. And the original 5 set such a high standard for vocal groups that everybody that comes through this journey want to live up to the standard of the original five. So
Mhm.
that's like a driving force inside of you to make you want to sing and give all that you've got to show your potential to help keep the group in that standard of what you came into.
I told Tony yesterday, I told him it's my height, nice looking women gonna fall out over. What I said, bro, you have to get ugly. Because these songs, you just can't go out there and sing them proper. You got to, you got to show that grit and kind of. He's still gonna be a nice looking fellow when he get through getting ugly. How about
Turn your face back up.
So, but you know what? See, that's what keeps us going. I love being with an organization that's got a great sense of humor. That'll take you through a whole lot of. I mean, life is serious, but you got to sprinkle it with a great sense of humor. And I got some funny jokers around me.
Well, it's funny you say that. I think we're the same way here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You got to live and enjoy yourself and have a good time, right? And that's what music is about. Is right where we started, Otis, saying music brings people together.
Yes.
And I just wanted to thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. It's inspirational thinking about a group that's got 60 years of an incredible catalog of music, and still I can see the sort of family and you guys coming together and how important the music is, and knowing that you're part of that tradition of the Temptations and where it's going. It's impressive to see a group really come together and work that way.
Well, they're etched in history now.
Yeah.
They're etched in history. Yeah. So thank you. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Been wonderful. So thank you so much. It's been great to see you guys. Really appreciate it. And we'll come back in just a second with a little treat to send the audience on their way. But gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Temptations.
I've got sunshine on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside, I've got the month of May. Oh, baby. Well, I guess you'd say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, my girl. Whoa, whoa, my girl. I've got so much honey, the bees envy me. Oh, baby. I've got a sweeter song than the birds in the tree. Oh, baby. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, my girl. Talking about my girl, my girl. Hey, hey, hey. Hey, hey. Ooh, yeah. I don't need no money for anything. Oh, baby. I've got all the riches, baby. One man can claim. Oh, baby. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, my girl. Talking about my girl. I'm talking about my girl. I've got sunshine on a cloudy day. Oh, I'm talking about my girl. I'm talking about my girl. Oh, talking about my girl. My girl.
My girl too.
We love you, baby.
Oh, take care.
Woo! Nice job, man.